Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the XFL Week 2 review. Here we're going to break down the games, kind of talk about them, and get information. Well, at least I'm going to talk about it with you guys, share my thoughts on it, and also put up results. So, first up, I'm going to put the results up on screen for you guys here. So far, Defenders officially leading their side of the bracket, or at least their conference, and the Houston Roughnecks leading the other side. Alright, so that's basically what I wanted to put up right off the bat, so you all are aware of what's going on in the league. So week 2 in the books, and now we get into the matchups, and we're going to go in order. Game number 1, DC Defenders going up against the Guardians. Guardians fall short of the Defenders in a shutout 27-0. I will say there were some critical errors made by the Guardians, including the passing game by McGloin, who threw 2 interceptions that ultimately, I believe, led to scoring drives in some form or fashion in favor of the Defenders. Cardale Jones, back-to-back games, looked completely in control and dominant. Rushed for 14 yards with 1 rush. Also threw 23 completions out of 37 attempts, as well as almost throwing 300 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. So the completion rating was a 62. Also, his receiving, Ross continues to look like a force to be reckoned with 95 receiving yards, 4 catches, as well as Tompkins, who they were mentioning before, at 92 yards with, I think it's 6 catches, if I'm remembering, and also a touchdown. My condolences to Rogers, I believe. He lost a relative and was playing the game. I think that stinks. And I think one thing that we can take away from this game, one thing that I will say about the interviews for this game, it really shed some light into how a team, or at least the Guardians team, is performing when under beatdown. You saw how McGloin, there were some jokes with the people I was watching with. We came up with the nickname McGroin when he's complaining because he's kind of being a you-know-what. But what I will say is leadership is important when it comes to sports. And I can relate to that kind of leadership. Well, I can relate to trying to be in the being in the leadership role where you're supposed to set a precedence, or really try to lead by example. And in a sport, in my case it was soccer for years, but I try to lead by example in the sense that when a ref makes a call or something doesn't go your way, you either reset yourself, shake it off, and try to focus on what you need to do next. And if any of your players get out of control, your job, or at least I took it as my job, to try to keep people level-headed, or at least try to find a way to be connected to each player in some way, and try to refrain from, despite maybe their performance is lackluster, you don't just go out there and name names or talk trash behind their back. I really try to stay out of that. But in this case, McGloin, from what it seemed like, started naming names on the sidelines, really started falling apart there in terms of complaining, saying that we need to change the whole game plan at the halftime. At that point, I would have replaced him then and there with the backup, Williams, for the second half, and see how well he does and really try to compare it. But it comes across as McGloin does not do well when you're getting nothing's going your way, and that's certainly somebody you don't want to have in terms of leadership on the team. It hurts morale, or it can lead to hurting morale and really damaging your team. And the play style and how everything was executed really showed on the field, and it just all crumbled. I think the defense did hold strong, though, for the Guardians. despite what the scoreline says, they held strong. The 2 interceptions basically put them on their heels in their own side of the field. So I'll give them the benefit of the doubt there. They really tried to hold strong against the defenders. So if there's a takeaway for the Guardians, it's a positive. It's that your defense is still really strong. It's just leadership is a problem. And you really need to just reset. As for the defenders, they continue to look like superstars as they remain undefeated in their division and continue to move forward. So there's that in favor of the defenders. All right, next game. This was an interesting one. The Dragons and the Vipers. So I kind of missed a bit of this game. I think I missed the second quarter. But when I came back, basically nobody had scored, but I missed a huge field goal attempt. I think it was by the Dragons, and they missed it. But if I recall, the Vipers scored with a field goal right before halftime, and then they pummeled in for a touch or an interception. It was a return all the way down. It was like 78 yarder from what they're putting on their YouTube channel. For a touchdown, so that put them up 9-0. So they really, these teams really held till the third quarter to explode, or the second half to explode forward. And then the Dragons put on an epic comeback to score 17. And what's great about this is, set 8-point game, you can still come back and possibly convert and win the game. And the Vipers got an epic drive downfield to make a last-second attempt. They got the push off, I think, which was ultimately led to a touchdown, but the penalty, because the Vipers wide receiver pushed off, really hurt them and ultimately led to them falling apart there, or not getting the touchdown there. And it came to a shot into the end zone play for the final play of the game. Huge turnout for the Dragons. I think that this looked well for the XFL, not just in terms of presentation. You have struggles early on. I mean, constant, too many turnovers, in my opinion. I mean, 3 interceptions by the Vipers, 1 interception thrown by Silvers, and I think there was 1 or 2 fumbles, but a lot of punts. In terms of turnovers, I think it was very prevalent in the first half, excuse me. And they were just struggling to get anything going. But what I will say is it certainly picked up in the second half. And I'm liking that. I like that they're struggling. It comes across as they're disjointed, or they're jumbled, they're messy, they're sloppy in the first half. And then it feels like the teams really get their act together in the second half and try to go all out. And I think, to me, it adds more excitement and building up the momentum, because first half you're kind of just like, all right, nothing's happening, and then bam, all of a sudden, like, the fourth quarter gets super intense, at least for this week. The Vipers and Dragons put on a really good game. I thoroughly enjoyed it. The Vipers ultimately did not use Murray at all. I don't know if he got traded or something like that, but they went with Cornelius as their starter. He didn't do too bad, threw 2 picks, which kind of stinks. Well, it does stink. But he was, I think, a step up, in my opinion, for the quarterbacks. They really need to make it. Ultimately, they really need to make a decision on who they want to go with and who they feel confident in. They have a quarterback problem, but their defense was much better this week in terms of how well they were doing. The offense still struggling to get something going, but I think quarterback is what they need to look into in terms of improvements. I think there's a lot of improvement, or there's a lot there that can be turning into a contendership team, and I'm certainly not going to give up on them. My favorite team is the Defenders, but I feel like these are the underdogs that you can root for to try to, like, you know what, you try and come back. I want you to try and succeed. I want them to at least get 1 win this season, really show up. And Silvers looked pretty decent in the Defenders game last week, and here he continued to look decent. He seems all right. He's not great. He's not bad. He's just okay. And that's sometimes all you need, but it's not something you need if you want to try to win a championship. You need a guy who's going to go the extra mile. And I think that they're going to be a contender, or at least try and make a running in the West, but only time will tell, and I could be completely wrong. on how it's going to play out because it's still early. There's still 8 games left. But that takes us over to the Dallas Renegades and the Wildcats. And oh boy, this was the same situation as nobody scored in the first half. Field goals, it was 3-3 going into the second half, and then the teams just exploded. Dallas Renegades did pick up the win, 25-18. Similar situation where they tried to sling it to get one last drive, and ultimately the Wildcats couldn't convert, and it was a turnover on downs at the very end. But in terms of just the back and forth, I really enjoyed this one. This is going to be a tough choice, in my opinion, on who got the play of the game. I can't remember. I'm trying to look at the stats. Yeah, so the Wildcats scored their last touchdown, and they went for the 3-point conversion to bring it from 15 to 18. People can say what they want. I think it was a smart move by trying to do that. You're at the point where you're just like, you know what, go big or go home, even if it didn't result in the win. And then ultimately the Renegades drove downfield with 1:14, scored one more touchdown to put it in. Awesome job on their part to just keep the momentum going. And Landry Jones finally stepped in as the quarterback. He was injured last week. They had Nelson playing at quarterback for the Renegades. But Landry Jones had a few funny moments when he was scrambling. He kind of just tumbled instead. I think there's a couple of things where I feel like they miss opportunities to really have fun with this, and I would have played dead if I was him. Something like that, where it comes across more as they have fun on the field. Just a suggestion. And try to have fun with the questions, even if you're tired, you're gassed. More on that later, but Landry Jones, I was scared for him mainly because of the brace. He reminds me of Big Ben. Not a great runner, but I think he's restricted by the brace as well as just coming back from injury. So he looks like he's just a hobbling mess, but at the same time he shows up and puts on some good performances. Or he showed a very decent performance. He threw 2 picks. I think he's the first quarterback to throw over 300 yards in a game. He was 70% on their passing rate or completion rating. He was 28 for 40. Not bad. Not bad at all. I think that's a fairly decent performance. He just needs to limit the picks, limit the mistakes. And one thing I will say in contrast to how you handle a situation, McGloin was the bad way of handling it. Landry Jones, to be fair, I did try to back it up and say that, the Wildcats and the Renegades aren't getting the crap kicked out of each other. But he did a good job handling the interviews where they're asking, what do you want to change, or what do you think your team needs to improve upon? And he puts it on himself. He says, listen, I'm just not playing like how I should be. It's on my performance. It's on me. I just need to get my passes down. And it was good job on his leadership part to handle that and put it on himself. Because he was identifying his mistakes were costing his team, and then he aims to improve. Johnson did it well for the Wildcats as well. And then, of course, after Jones said that, I think it was the next drive, he hails up a 40-yard pass out of his own 10-yard line down the field, which was absolutely amazing. So the Renegades picked up the win over the Wildcats. That was a divisional game. They were both 0-1, desperately needed to gain some momentum and traction. And not desperately, but they both could have really used the win, and ultimately the Renegades won that one in a pretty solid fashion. And then the final game, Battlehawks and the Roughnecks. Another close one. Roughnecks, as you can see, clearly picked up the win, 28-24. PJ Walker and Ta'amu. So this was a battle of quarterbacks. Ta'amu and PJ Walker were both phenomenal last week in terms of their performances. PJ Walker was named Player of the Week last week. I would make a possible contesting argument that he might not be the Player of the Week this week. I think that might go to some other player or one or two other players. But in terms of scoring, they opened up right off the bat, swinging field goal for the Houston Roughnecks, touchdown by the Battlehawks. So this was more back and forth the whole way through. Battlehawks tried to rally back. or they rallied back for the lead, and then ultimately the Roughnecks had took control, and the Battlehawks were chasing them for the majority of the game, trying to get back. Costly errors by Ta'amu, throwing 2 picks. But all in all, I had so much fun watching the quarterback battle on the offense. I think the defense struggled a little bit on both sides to get something going or to stop the offense. At times they did, and it was like 3 and out for the Roughnecks or 3 and out for the Battlehawks, and then the other team would just drive down the field and really make a contesting move. So it was moves like that where it kept me engaged. I think this game was pretty good. Battlehawks ultimately couldn't pick up the win. This looks good for the Roughnecks. So the Roughnecks and DC Defenders are the undefeated teams coming out. Wildcats and the Vipers are the 0-2 teams. And then the other 4, the Guardians, the Dragons, the Renegades, and the Battlehawks are all in the middle ground with a 1-1 record. But I will say Ta'amu looked great. He almost threw 300 yards. And going into the third quarter, I think halfway through the fourth, he only had 3 incompletions. And it was because, you're driving down the field, you're trying to put up points. He was throwing passes more. They definitely prioritize the run game, or at least their one guy is a huge hammer when it comes to just powering through people. I might be confusing him with the Renegades, maybe. I'm not sure, but I think it was the Battlehawks who had a pretty good running back who just plowed through people. Even though he didn't get many yards, he would just, you think that he's going to get nothing, and then just bam, he broke through the line with pure power. I think that was the Battlehawks here. But Ta'amu threw 284 yards with a passing completion percentage of 81. He was 30 and 37, and I think he only had 3 incompletions like halfway through the fourth. Up to that point, he threw 2 picks, which were costly errors, but an amazing performance from him, as well as his receivers who put up some awesome performances. Phillips, the wide receiver for the Roughnecks, really looked like a superstar with those 3 catches, but the big name for their team, P.J. Walker, continuing to be a highlight for the Roughnecks and really stand out to me, not just to me, but at least a few people from what I'm seeing in comments. He's great in avoiding pressure in the pocket. He did get sacked at one point, but he continues to be a highlight reel where he makes impossible plays, or what seemed to be impossible plays, turn into impossible situations where people would think, I don't know how you're going to get out of this one, and then he does it. So it's not impossible, but it just seems like, it's unlikely they're going to get out of this situation. Then bam, P.J. Walker just makes it happen by scrambling out of the pocket or avoiding like 3 or 2 guys and just sliding. So all in all, great performance by all the teams, aside from the Guardians, where it just looked like systematic destruction. But there was a bunch of factors in there where it just looked like an implosion in terms of the team on itself. Not just like the other team just being down on you, but it doesn't help when your leadership just feels like it's collapsing. But all the other 3 games were really close. If I had to give a play of the game or game of the week, it's close because I want to give it to the Renegades and Wildcats for how fun that was. Battlehawks and Roughnecks were on my mind as well for just being a slugfest. But shockingly, I think I was most entertained by the Dragons and Vipers. I think what helped was how lively the crowd was, how active they were in what was going on the field, and then that just final drive by the Vipers to really try to, and they came so close to punching it in for the touchdown, that just added to it, the fourth quarter drama where everything turned up, or they just turned up the heat in terms of competitiveness and the scoring in the fourth quarter. But it was really close in my vote. But first week, I didn't say it before, but I think I did, but DC Defenders and Dragons won my heart over in that game, or in week 1. So the Dragons back-to-back for me in terms of my favorite games. That's just a personal little favorite in terms of which games I enjoyed the most. But afterwards, here's my final thoughts before I close out the video on like other things that go on. So in terms of attendance, I just wanted to grab these numbers real quick from articles that were being posted. In week 1, the numbers were 17,000 across the board for all the home games, which I think is good, shows consistency. And then week 2, DC hosted both weeks. They dropped from 17,163 to 15,031. I'm sorry I don't have a picture to show both things for you, but I'm just going to read it out. So 17,000 to 15,000, which isn't bad. The Audi Field capacity is 20,000, so they still got 75% of the stadium filled out. The Dragons actually got 29,000 in attendance. That's the record so far this season. Awesome job. The crowd was loud and lively, which was fantastic to add to that game. They really helped. It's like having a wrestling crowd. When you're going at shows, sometimes you'll have really dead crowds who don't help the show at all, but then sometimes you have fantastic crowds who can really pick up the excitement for your teams and really bring up the energy level for the game and just make it that much more of a better experience for the people at home watching. LA hosted this week. They currently have the record for the lowest attendance, 14,979, so just slightly lower than DC. That's honestly not bad. They run the risk of dropping, though, because they're 0-2, so that's just something to keep in mind. They might drop slightly next week because I believe they're hosting the DC Defenders, so they might drop slightly with those numbers. But I think in terms of, I don't know the TV ratings, so we'll have to see. But that's just something I wanted to highlight. It was close, but nothing to be alarmed by, in my opinion. Houston actually dropped slightly from 17,800 to 17,100, but honestly, that just shows consistency right there. Only 700 attendance drop. Honestly, I don't think that's alarming, and considering that Houston now consistently looks like they've got a star with P.J. Walker, they can really possibly drive up the attendance or keep it consistent if their performance keeps up. So I don't think that drop is going to be anything alarming. Same with the Defenders. I think that it was the first or it's the second week. People are still trying to figure it out. And this certainly shows, because I had a lot of people telling me that the Guardians looked the strongest coming out of last week. I think I said it in the previous video that this is one performance. You can't judge everything on one performance. You got to see how the rest of the season plays out. And the Guardians certainly crumbled when it didn't go their way in terms of leadership, among other things on the field. Their defense still held strong, in my opinion, from what I saw. They still looked strong out there and resilient. But there's certainly things that they need to fix. So they were an up-and-down seesaw. Meanwhile, the Defenders and Houston Roughnecks continue to look consistent. Same with the Battlehawks. Renegades certainly kept their momentum. Wildcats certainly looked about the same. The Vipers and Dragons continue to look the same. Like everybody felt consistent except for the Guardians, because they dropped so significantly in terms of their performance. But everybody else felt pretty much the same from last week in terms of their performances and what I was expecting, which is good. Which is good for my perception. It makes me want to keep watching more, and I'm excited for week 3. I don't know the matchups. I'll try to find a picture. If I can't, it's fine. But yeah, I'm going to take some time to edit this for you guys to put up some pictures. But all in all, great performance. Love to see more on what goes on for the league. But I hope you all enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think down below. If you guys have any thoughts you want to share as well on the week, let me know. But I hope you all enjoyed. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, of course, if you choose. But most importantly, and as always, suit up, Mad Army. I'll see you next time.